Hello friend, welcome back. In our previous video here we successfully designed our marks entry page, and also if you select any class, this class related all that subject is now loaded, and also I load all that our exam type, right? So now I want to with our year and with our class, I want to get all that our data first, and from to this position I want to add that mark. Okay, I want to add that mark for this student, so that will be everything will be interconnected. So if you want to do that work, I think you already know about that procedure, okay, because we did the same things for our role management. That means the role generate table. So now I want to change it. It will be as a mark, okay, mark entry. So mark entry table. So from here I put one of the note for you. So that is our, for the mark I want to display that ID number. I want to display that student name, the father name, gender, and role. So right now we don't need this role. Here I want to make it as a mark, right? So that will be as a marks. So from to this position I want to add that marks for a specific this student, okay, and also I load that all that our ID. So then that is our role generate. So now I want to change that name. I want to change it as a marks. Okay, I name it as a marks, and then entry, marks entry tr, right? So this type of another name, and also there is a role generate ID. So better I want to change that also as a mark and then entry. Okay, that will be our this table ID. So in the role generate I have also discussed about that things with you. It should be just like that same. And here you can see that is our JavaScript, right? So from to the JavaScript here we have to load every data, and which I have already discussed about that things with you. There is a click onto the click area. That means when you use click as a search, right? That means when you click in particular that as a search goes into the search area. I have also put one of the ID, so that is our ID as a search ID. So now I want to add that as a search, and then the variable as a year ID. It should be just like that same. There is year ID, and then the class ID, because there is actually also the class ID and the subject, and then our exam. So here also we have to add two of this. Better I copy it, and then I add two of this. So our year class, and after that year class I take another one. This is class, and there is our assigned subject ID. I copy it. Okay, so that is our name. I copy this, so I take one of the variable and name it as a assigned subject ID. That will be also as a assigned subject ID as a val. Okay, and then also there is another one. I take it as a exam type ID. I copy it. So that will be our another one as a exam type ID, and I name it as exam type ID. And also I put every ID. If you go there, you can see I have also put that ID for the exam type ID, and also I put another ID for the assigned subject ID, right? Now we add both of these. Perfect. So here I updated that part, and that will be, as I told you, it will be just like that same. And then exam type ID I take it, and the Ajax URL route. And now I want to create another route. So this route I want to name it as a student. Okay, student get student. So right now I want to make it as only our mark student. Okay, marks get students. Okay, so this type of one of the routes. So with this route I want to get all that our students, and also here we have to pass that as a response JSON. So with this response JSON I want to pass it. So that will be the same, only our year ID and the class ID I want to get this data, and then the success, if we get this, then our role generate. So now we have to change it, because I updated that our table name, I name it as our mark entry, right? So now that is actually our ID. So I want to update it, this ID as a mark entry, and then remove the D class. As I told you before, that is actually one of the hide one of the table, because of all into the D none. You can see I already put that or this div as a row as a D none. That means that will be as a hide one of the class. So perfect. After that there is our everything will be just like that same. Here there is our V student ID. it will be one of the input field as a hidden as a student ID. And now I want to also pass another input field for the ID number. Okay, so better I copy this input field. I copy total this input field, and after that I paste it. Okay, here I want to take another one. I paste it, so that will be as a student ID, not that is student. I want to take another one as a ID underscore number. Okay, so now I want to add another one, and that will be also as a multiple, right? Student ID will be as a multiple data, it should be get, and multiple student ID number also it should be get. And then the value will be as a v our ID number. So if you want to access that ID number, if you go to our, I want to get this data from our student, that is actually assign student. If you go to that assign student type model, I have already created that relationship. Maybe if you go to that model, you can see that is our assign student, and to the assign student I have already created one of the relationship with our user model, and I take the things with this method, that means our student method, right? So now with this student method I want to access our user table, and with the user table our field name as a user ID, right? That means the ID number. So now I want to access it. So if you want to access it, that will be our method name as a student. So now with this v I want to access our student, and with this student I want to access our ID underscore number, right? I hope it's very much clear to you. So right now before I have only passed that student ID, right now I want to take another input field. I want to pass another hidden type field as a ID number. Okay, then with this student I want to access that ID number. Perfect. That's all. So that it will be display our student ID number. It will be display that student name. So with this student I want to display that name. With this student I have to display the father name, the gender, and now there is another field I have to add that name. So that will be as a I name it as a marks. Okay, I name that field as a our database field name. I always actually prefer to use the same name. You can see into the database field name I name it as a marks. So that is actually a marks. Here I want to input it, that means insert this data, so that means that will be as a marks. And also here I want to import that multiple one, so that will be as a multiple one, and then there is a value. So right now we don't need this value. Okay, so here I want to actually remove it. I remove total things from here. So perfect. So that is our marks, and then there is our mtd, and then there is finish, and there is our HTML will be generated. Our HTML generated code, I name it that in our t-body as a marks entry tr. I copy it, so that will be as a marks entry tr ID. So here it will be loaded, right friend? So that's all you have to do. Okay, so here that is everything should be great. So now we have to create our this route. So now if you create this route, we have to create it in our web route, and I also want to create this in outside of our this prefix as a marks prefix. Here I take new one, because here from to this position also we have to pass that as a response JSON data. So I copy this route. Okay, I copy this route, and now go to our web route. Into the web route area I name that our route will be as a student marks get student. So now I name it as a get student. Okay, or student, you can also use it, student marks and then get student. So that will be our URL. And in our default controller I want to create another method. I name that method as a get. Okay, get student. So that will be our method. So now I copy it. Now go to our this math, that means the controller, default controller. Into the default controller, after this I create another one as a public, and then function, and then our method will be as a get student. Okay, I create this method. And also as I told you, it will be as a JSON data. So I put as a request and the $request. That will be as a request and the $request. So right now from here I pass two of these data. I want to pass two of these data as the year ID and the class ID. So first of all I want to take two of these variable. So I take one of the variable as a year ID. Okay, year underscore ID, and I name that with our request, our requested field name as the same name. If you go our requested field name, I name it as a year ID, right? So that will be as a year ID, and also same as our class ID, and class ID will be that same as a request or requested class ID, right? So that is our requested class ID. Because of all, if you go there, I have also named that field name as a class ID. So that will be our two of this requested one, and now I want to get this data. That means I take as all data, okay? And then our table name right now I want to get this data from our assigned student, right? So that is our assigned student. So from to this table I want to get this data. So if you go to this table, into this table here, you can see I have already created that relation of the student with the user table. So everything is ready made, so here we don't need to do anything. And then with this assigned student, I want to access our user. So for the reason, so here we have to add that with our same with our model name. So our model I have already created as a student, right? So that is our assign student, and that is our method name as a student. With the student method I have created that relation with our user table. So now we can actually use it. So that will be as a student, and with this student I want to put that condition as a where condition, where our same condition, that means the year ID will be our this year ID that I take it. So I take it with this variable. So that will be our year ID, and also we have to do the another one or the where condition, where our class ID will be the same. Okay, that means the class ID will be our this class ID. Okay, that means this class ID. Perfect. That means this class ID, this year ID, actually our this year ID and this class ID. Okay, so this will be matched with our this requested data. That means the request year ID and the requested class ID. I hope at that point you will understand about it, because we did the same logic a lot of the time. And after that I want to simply get this data. That means I get all the data. So now we get it, and after that we have to return it. That means return response with the JSON, and then I pass it as a JSON. Okay, so with the JSON I pass our this all data. So that will be our all data. I simply pass it. Perfect. So now I pass this data. Now in our into the mark area, it should be loaded. So now it should be loaded all the data, and into this mark area I will loaded our marks entry tier. That means all that our tier data is now should be loaded in particular this area. Okay, so if everything okay, now it should be work. If everything okay, now it should be work. Because of all get that year ID, assign that subject, and that's the student, year ID, class ID, everything is great. Now if you click as a save all, so let's first of all I want to check it, and now go there, now click as a refresh. So now I want to select as a year. Okay, I select as a year as a 2000. I select as a class 1. I select as a health subject, and type as a first terminal. Okay, so into the first terminal, if you click as a search, yes, you can see friend, it's now perfectly getting all that our field. That means all that our field ID number is visible, student name is visible, father name is visible, gender is visible, and mark is also visible. Okay, so from to this position I want to assign all that our mark, that means the student mark, and after that here I want to click as a submit. So this submit button here I want to insert this data. Okay, I want to insert all the data in our appropriate this student mark. I hope it's very much clear to you friend what exactly the things I want to do on here. Okay, so now we have to insert this data. Better I want to continue this process. In our next video I will insert this data in our this student mark table. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.